Good evening. Can you hear me? Is the sound okay?
Yep.
Great.
Excellent.
Lydia, are you on as well?
Yes.
Good evening, Sister Usha.
Good evening. So, welcome to today's evening chat, and we actually going to do our own introductions. So I'm going to hand you over to Lydia, and we'll start with Lydia taking us into her introduction and a little bit in terms of how we're going to work today's program. So Lydia, welcome and good evening.
Thank you so much, Sister Usha. It's a pleasure to be a part of today's conversation. As some of you have already seen in the advertisement, my name is Lydia Machaka. I'm very much conscious of who I am. Even in the, let me say, in the advert, you will notice that I identify myself as a climate justice and energy officer in Brussels. So that is just what I do on a normal day. But today I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the topic today. So we're going to start our discussions based on just introducing ourselves, identity first, which you will see will form a part of the discussions later on. So defining who we are, or starting with defining and understanding who we are. The second, for about 20 minutes or so, the second segment will then go straight into us talking about the topic, which is codependence. So we'll get to understand the psychological basis of it. And then afterwards, we'll share experiences and we'll open the floor for everybody to talk. Without further ado, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm very conscious of who I am. There's only one version of me on this planet, which makes me unique. And I do recognize that although I grew up in Limpopo, South Africa, now I'm married and I'm based in Brussels. I am Christian, and I would like to identify myself as an extension of God's love, his passion, and compassion on earth. And as always, I ask God to guide my path, although I might not always understand his will, nor walk in his footsteps, but at least, sorry, there's a message saying recording, but at least that is my goal every day, to follow in his footsteps. And my worldview is that human beings are not the center of the universe, but we do exist or coexist in a larger ecosystem or the web of life beyond this, let me say, on this earth and even beyond. So what I wanted to say is that when I talk of this coexistence, there's often this famous African saying, I think many of us would understand, actually this philosophy, Ubuntu, which is clearly captured into this saying that says, Motu ki motu kabatu, which means I am because we are. And this goes very, very, very beyond humanity, but it could go into talking about how we relate with other living beings, that could be plants and that, or even animals. I don't believe in coincidences so much, but I believe that all things work together for my good when I live under God's abundance grace, his love, his power and faithfulness. And he has blessed all of us with many gifts that make us to be able to make it in life. And one of them is our conscience. Sometimes people call it gut feeling, or also the inner voice. And really today would like us to really get in touch with that inner voice. At this present moment, I would like to give Usha an opportunity also to introduce him to herself, and also to just tell us a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Lydia. And it's true, you know, I perhaps didn't have a big thing about who I am, but I actually asked myself what was my purpose. And that's actually what got me onto my journey. And so what I find that growing up as a young woman in a community which is very patriarchal, I was fortunate that I grew up in a home where we were only girls. And so had the experience of growing up with a great amount of equality, because we didn't have any brother, which was actually competing with any of the attention. And so that was actually something that made us not look at things to be a masculine job, but a feminine job. And really, I think that that helped me a lot. But I think on anyone's journey, what is most important is that, you get this deeper sense that there must be a reason why I came onto this earth. And so I used to keep asking myself, what's that purpose? And sometimes you would align it in terms of the career you would follow, or, something that you are meant to do. But I think I didn't realize that I had this deep calling. And so when I did come across the Brahma Kumaris, it almost like fulfilled all the needs. One, it allowed me to understand what my purpose is. And in very simple words, it's like the spirit that I am has an opportunity to express itself. And so I just use this physical vehicle as a wonderful opportunity to ride on, so that as I'm gliding through life, I'm not having to work that hard. I have the use of something that's very spectacular in the form of the human body, but not to be sidetracked by it, and always remain focused that I'm actually the master creator. And another thing that I thought was also very beautiful is that on this journey, we're not really like silos. We're all co-creators. And I like to just at this point, take the example of my mother as an example that, in a patriarchal world, was a woman that had to bring up her girls single-handedly. And I just see that the wisdom doesn't come from intellectual knowledge, because she didn't have that education, but she had a wisdom that came from a different space. And that was that we need to live honorable lives, and that power lies in actually being that. So I think that there are a few things that, in a way, has defined my own journey. And I will always give thanks to those on my journey to help me. But most important, the truth that was revealed to me to help me understand myself has helped me today understand that whilst we are living in a world where we can't be silos, we also need to learn how to work on an interdependent level. And so I would really love for us to chat about, because I don't feel that I started off my journey feeling this way. I think I started my journey thinking that we always needed to have someone, and somewhat had a bit of dependency, but how following the path and really being true to what I was learning helped me to see the difference and experience the liberation I feel now.
Thank you so much. I think actually I've been collecting quite a few words from what you were saying and looking at some commonalities. I love the fact that even in my introduction, it might seem like, I've got it all together. I know who I am. But just to say as well, it was not easy. It is a journey that I'm still on to fully understand who I am and my potential. And yes, all of this has to do with our experiences in life, the type of society that we do come from. And I think some of the things that I would really like to talk about next, because you did talk about interdependence, but interdependence and codependency, are these things the same? And I will actually take us to that point where we can really unpack it. For those who have just entered or joined us recently, we just really started the conversation, really starting by just talking about who we are, because understanding who we are becomes part of, let me say, part of understanding our journey, understanding our purpose, as Sister Usha has mentioned. And it also helps us to decide, because every day, every activity, every behavior, it's part of the decisions that we make. And those decisions becomes much more fruitful if they are in line with who we are, rather than the opposite. So I would like to take this moment for us to start talking about this codependency, because we heard Sister Usha talking about interdependency. First of all, I would like just to reflect a little bit from psychology, but just first of all, before going there, just know that, and I'm sure all of us know that it's quite obvious that we human beings are inherently social beings. So we are wired to be relational. You know, we were born in a family, as sister has mentioned, the type of family she was born in. I also mentioned, I was born in South Africa, in Limpopo, but in a different setting where, I had brothers and sisters. There was, I wouldn't say competition, but, there was like, I need to know what my brother is doing and how do I help my brother. So it was also a journey leading to me understanding and defining myself. So we as humans do enjoy interacting. We socialize with others. We encourage one another all the time. We share living spaces with other living beings. As I mentioned, beyond humanity, we share this planet with plants and animals. But also, neuroscience also indicate that it is very easy for humans to mirror each other's emotions. So when you're sad, immediately I was like, oh, I'm sorry, what's wrong? I'm influenced by seeing you sad. When you're happy as well, I am easily influenced by your emotions. When you're happy as well, that makes me happy. But sometimes other people's emotions or action indeed, or in the end, become, let me say, what determines our happiness over time. And this is part of what codependency is all about. So I think how this affects us is that, first of all, I would like to say that this influence or even people's actions, how they influence us, happen because we have created for ourselves expectations or certain standards for ourselves and how we manage them. Sometimes, yes, expectations are good and they are underpinned by these psychological factors like maybe attitudes that we do have, by values that we do have, and sometimes by social norms. These are standards of behavior that helps us to determine what is normal, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is morally good or even bad. And sometimes all of this also we have learned throughout our life journey, through our experiences. But really, to the crux of the matter, codependency is a society-wide problem. Why do I say so? First of all, it's really described by relationships, any relationship, whether it's personal relationship or work relationship, but where a person is very needy or dependent upon or very attached to another person or thing. I'll talk about a thing later on, but this relationship is defined, or is defined by a moment or a situation or a condition where an individual becomes vested in somebody else to a point that they cannot function independently anymore. So it's good for us to always, or maybe every now and then, support one another. But the problem starts when a person channels their energy too much to supporting that person to a point that they cannot make space for themselves to support themselves. This creates a sense of loss in identity, and which we can talk about when we come to examples, and actually a loss of independence or stagnation. So sometimes you feel that when somebody is gone, then you can't be, I can give an example of this codependency, and really those who are parents would really understand what I'm talking about. So every parent understands the importance of rearing their child without promoting attachment, because they understand the potential consequences later on in the child's adulthood. So you don't want to raise your child to a point that you always have to follow them around. And even if they I don't know, they hold a pen, you're already there chasing them and say, oh, don't hurt yourself. So if you continue being too attached to yourself, to your child, and you don't give them a space for them to actually learn by themselves, it can become a problem in the adulthood. And also, we know that sometimes when people are born or are raised from a violent or abusive family, this reinforces abusive relationships. We can witness this in South Africa. And some of this, sometimes when people talk about codependency, they often think about just relationships, but sometimes work relationships could also, let me say, indicate codependency. And I can give an example. You know, and sometimes people, one of us could be this type of a colleague, but sometimes we do have colleagues who free ride on others' hard work, because like every time there's a project, they always say, there's Lydia who will do it. But the person who always free rides on others do not see the danger of losing the important skills that they themselves could be learning, and they could miss out on the confidence that they could have gained themselves on a particular task. And we see this a lot going on when people in business, when people call themselves mentors, to a point that, you know, they own a mentee or the person they mentor, to a point that they don't allow them to feel free to make their own choices and explore the world. There's so many examples that I can talk about, including alcoholism, where somebody becomes too codependent to alcohol to a point that they themselves cannot function without it. So in today's world, it's very easy to become codependent. I mean, and I would like us actually to come to a point where we can just sit back and ask ourselves, as I believe, as I've been talking through this codependency, I've managed to give an opportunity to, let me say, sit back, think, and some of you could relate to what I am saying. So maybe perhaps we can ask ourselves, is my happiness dependent on others' joy or reaction? I mean, in today's world of social media, we know if somebody tweets or says something on Instagram or Facebook, then we feel sad. But sometimes you can even say we put ourselves out there to such exposure. But also at the same time, is my happiness dependent on me having money? That's another thing, because money, it is very possible to be attached to money. So what happens is that sometimes that particular person or thing that you are dependent or attached to, it happens that change happens. So to them. So what happens if that person changes? You say, I always love this person or like this person because they are like 1, 2, 3. And life happens that a person change. For example, you can say, I love this person because they are tall, or I love this person because they weigh, they're thin, they're petite. But it does happen, especially this year. I love running, and it happened that I missed my running exercises, and I couldn't really say I'm petite anymore. So can somebody say that they love somebody because they're petite or not? Because change does happen, and those expectations that we set for ourselves do change as well. So, and I would like to draw us to attention that change also is a form of growth, and can be expressed also or brought by loss. So sometimes it might be that that thing that you had, or that state of being that you had, changes or is lost. Would you still be happy? So in a way, that is what I wanted to talk about today. I've described what codependency is. I would like to open the floor to everybody to, just talk, give, maybe share experiences where they might feel that they are codependent, or also that they say, you know what, I know I'm codependent, but I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling to separate myself from this place. So I would like to open the floor for that.
I think whilst people are getting warmed up to actually share, I think what is good to realize is that I like the fact that you draw the idea of codependency even on substances and different things, the things that we see, we feel. But even the idea that when we have this attitude that we need something from somebody, I like the way you said that, we just ride on somebody. So nice to notice that are there things that I just don't like doing? And because I don't like doing, then I'm going to find somebody else to actually do. We all have different kinds of personalities. And so there are certain things we do much easier and some things we find more difficult. And so things that are more difficult, instead of applying our skills and enhancing those, we palm it off onto somebody who's already good at it and say, oh, you're good at it, just you can do it easily. But failing to realize that actually when I do that, I'm actually shortchanging myself.
Absolutely.
And so it's very powerful to understand that what I might think is saving me a couple hours of work is actually in a way bringing me backward and actually causing a loss to myself. So
absolutely,
it doesn't even have to be many gross things like, I can't do without a person or things, but I'm just using laziness as an excuse to actually not come into my own power. And I think this is actually where I would like to take us to. But if there is any things from our group from the participants, it'll be lovely to hear. If you have comments, you can even write it in the chat. Because first of all, before we can even deal with the problem, it's good to diagnose, to actually recognize that actually I have a tendency. They say that even with AA, when they're doing with addiction, you have to first actually say, guess what, I am addicted. That's when actually I can ask for help. So can we recognize this kind of tendency within ourselves? So you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute and you can chat, and it'll be nice to have that conversation. Is there anybody? I think, Lydia, generally in these hourly conversations, people are used to just listening in. So maybe what I think we'll do is let's stimulate a few more questions, and individuals and participants can use this as a checking point, and you could perhaps make notes if you don't want to immediately participate. But from this time together, it'll be so nice if you can really observe yourself. So Lydia started off by saying, is my happiness dependent on anything other than me, myself? And then my question to you is that, are the things that you prefer not to do just because you don't think you're good at that? And so these are just a couple of reflection points for us to recognize. And then the kind of solution that we want to chat about is applicable, because then, if you don't see that you have a problem, then why would you actually want to listen to the solution? So it's important for us to be able to see that tendency of codependency within myself. And that actually can be something that will actually help me. So a few other signs I would think that we can look at. We always doubt ourselves. We constantly checking and seeing. One is to verify, which is very good, because consulting with somebody and getting a second opinion is one thing. But where I actually have the fear of not committing myself to making the decision. So I'm very hesitant all the time. So I'm lacking confidence in actually initiating things or actually taking things forward. The other thing can be I procrastinate as well, because there's a level of fear that comes through. And so I hold back on very important things that needs to be done. And I'm waiting for somebody or something. So I end up making a lot of excuses. And this can also be a very powerful sign of actually being codependent. Then the other thing is that we always need a lot of control spaces, meaning that I can only do something if 1, 2, 3 is in place. So again, it's another kind of either looking for excuses or actually just plainly procrastinating. Now, in situations like that, what happens is that we have this inner dialogue that's happening inside of ourselves. And so when we are afraid, firstly, and we in doubt, we can use many different external things to actually avoid us from actually looking at the real problem. And so for me, I found that especially you could actually have a little setback in, some of the skills. But what I found is that when you have this feeling that I need to be my whole self, my real self, I don't want to deprive myself. I don't want. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but with some sound.
Did I kind of disappear?
No?
There's some instrumental music playing.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, well, that's what I was saying. These are other pointers, either I'm procrastinating, making excuses, putting a lot of conditions before I get things done. And so we then actually go into a setup where we not getting the job done and actually just going back. So, Lydia, how did you find yourself making the shift from actually perhaps being dependent on others and situation to actually realizing that at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. And if I want to get somewhere, I need to actually make that shift inside of myself. Can you perhaps define a defining moment, that made that change happen? Is there something distinct that made that shift?
Yes, well, I'm happy to share actually 2 experiences or 3. So those who really know me quite well would know that I am a twin. So I shared, let me say, a womb with my other half. So we spent most of the time together when we were growing up, from primary school, even high school, even tertiary. So we spend most of, even we chose same subjects, well, up until, let me say, first year in university. So you can imagine the level of, okay, I wouldn't say, let me say, codependent. So in a way, because we are twins, we have to do the same thing, and also that I have to match up to her. So I always had to measure myself according to her standards, and also vice versa. So she also always had to measure up to me. So I found that to some extent it was helpful, but over time, no, not at all. I remember actually this used to create a lot of conflict because I had expectation that because we shared the same date, so we should be the same, we should perform the same way, and even dress the same way. And I remember when I was 12 years old, after many years of conflict with my twin sister, because of some of this conflict even used to be caused by the fact that if we wore identical clothing and I lose mine, then I would be easy to say the one that is found is mine. So, just these are some of the things that, well, children would really relate, or all of us would relate in our childhood. But there came a moment where we sat together. It was not easy, but we were very honest with ourselves. And I'm glad that for us that this journey or this conversation began earlier on while we were still in primary school. And we say, we really can't continue like this. There's friction almost every day about everything in life. But I think what helped us as well is that we are not identical twins. So we are fraternal, non-identical twins. That helped us to some extent because we end up saying, we do share something in common, but we are not the same. So we are not one person. we really need to understand who we are, our identities, and choose that path. And that's when we went to university. I chose my path, which is in the field of psychology, and she chose her path, which is in the field of applied maths and chemistry. So that was a defining moment for me and her, because we really began to say, yeah, we share a lot in common, but what is it? How do we stay true to ourselves as individuals? So that's one example that I do remember and I value quite well, that it happened in our lives. And that helped us, even as we develop in our careers separately or independently, we knew how to support one another, to encourage one another, instead of always seeing if the other measures to the other. And I think even those who are in any relationship, could understand this with their partners sometimes. It sometimes happens, but until you sit down and really become true to yourself, even in that relationship, and talk, I think really conversations or frank conversations are important, because sometimes we live to society standard. And when I mean society standard, it's how should a woman behave or a guy behave, and we are not true to ourselves. And that creates codependency. I think the other one has to do with, let me say, my colleagues. When we were still in university, I remember that we used to attend quite a few events in Grahamstown. There used to be winter, like the Winter Fest.
The arts, yeah.
Yeah, the arts festival. And, there's quite a lot happening, and we always wanted to know what's happening. But the logistics of it is quite daunting. And I remember I have a friend who is very good at that. She if you say, arrange me, let me say, a trip to somewhere, she knows exactly where to buy the tickets and on which day. I know I can do that, but because I knew that was her strength, I always relied on her and just said, you do it. I mean, we agree and say, we're going to attend the fest. But at the end of the day, it became her responsibility all the time. And I realized that I didn't realize that it was a problem until a point where I realized that she's no longer the person that I always, she's bubbly, but then she changed. And I said, can we please just talk? And she was like, I know, what, I love helping, this is part of, we love attending the fest, but I don't know, it always has to be my responsibility. I realized that, actually, I thought, she's fine. I mean, she's good. And so we should always leave her to do it. And I realized that she enjoys doing that, but not that it always becomes her responsibility, because we become complacent. And for me, over time, I realized after I've left university that, oh my God, I've always relied on this friend of mine to do all of these logistical things. But now, having to work differently, or even in a different country, I had to then start really taking such things much more seriously. So these are some of the examples that I do talk about. And for some people, they might not even be able to get over it. It can still become an issue. But I'm glad that, I really also, me being true to myself again, I always said, no, this is not good. I really must strengthen this muscle. I know it's not easy, but I must strengthen this muscle. And I continue doing that.
So Lydia, it looks like we've got one person in the chat that would like to share experience. Please, could you unmute and you can start?
Okay, I'm here.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Good evening.
And hello.
My name is Nirasha, and thank you for this platform. A very, very interesting discussion. I just want to share, as I'm sitting and listening, I've never used the word codependency in my relationship, but it's just bringing to mind how codependent my relationship was. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I always say that for the past 30 years, I have been sleepwalking. I have been in a marriage for 30 years, and only until last year, I was able to leave that marriage. And it had become very, very toxic. My ex-husband was the man I knew from a 7-year-old girl. We were at school together, got married very young, have 3 beautiful kids, but there were intermittent joy and sadness over the years. But while I'm sitting and listening and thinking about my journey, I realized how we took codependency for granted, what we thought of as love, what we thought of as normal, 2 people loving each other, 2 people bringing kids, and being in each other's space was actually not normal. It was absolutely abnormal. And unless you don't stop sleepwalking, unless you don't wake up one day, you will never realize that you were in a codependent relationship. And I am just as much to blame as my partner was, because we were both codependent on each other, and in the process destroyed each other. And thankfully, I'm so grateful that I woke up one day, even if it was 30 years later, I woke up and realized this is not on. You cannot live like that. And it was simple things depending on each other, for me not being able to drive, and I would depend on him to take me everywhere I wanted to go. It would be something as simple as that. So yeah, it's very easy to to confuse codependency with love, and with an expectation that of normality. And unless you can't see that fine line, unless you can't see that difference, it's going to be you're going to be stuck in there. And once I decided that it was toxic, once I decided that I cannot live this life anymore, and I took control of my life, I decided consciously to make that shift, to leave, so that I can get my life in order, I can get control, and I can take my power back. Because being in a codependent relationship takes your power away. You're left powerless. And unless you don't make that decision to take your power back, it's a very sad place to be in. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nirasha. In fact, that's really a nice point for us to get to the point in terms of where do we go from here? And I think from all the things that we've been chatting about, it's like we lose ourselves. And so how is it that we can actually get ourselves back? And I think that whole process of just to turn inward and to know that I'm more than just the physical things around me. One thing that I found for myself is that it's got to do with self-worth and self-respect. If we don't have that value of honoring who we are, we're always going to look at somebody outside of us as being more. I like us to use this and think about this word, I am enough. That whatever I need in this world to accomplish, to achieve, who I am is absolutely it. I am enough. And if I can actually have that thought, then actually I can use what I have on hand and begin the task. I'll give you a very simple example. Like most people, if they're going to bake scones, they need self-raising flour. But if you know that self-raising flour is just plain flour with a combination of a little bit of baking soda and baking powder, and so you can never not make scones if you don't have self-raising flour, because you can always make your own self-raising flour. Now, why I gave this example is that, for all the people that are on this chat today, and if ever you could recognize that, you feel that you're in codependent relationship, or you are just codependent in any way, don't look at yourself in any way to think that something's wrong. All it's saying is that you need to turn your attention inward and start to value yourself and honor yourself. And do you know that we thrive from other people giving us compliments and encouraging us? But the first person that needs to show that respect and regard to me is me. And so when I treat myself with respect and with love, and I honor and value myself, I'm actually teaching others how to do that for me. And so it is really important, like Narisha was saying, to actually understand that the relationship was toxic and that I needed to actually do something and take my power back. Because as long as I become the victim, it's no way that we can make somebody else say that you are oppressing me. It's because I've taken the role of being the victim. And so that's why I then end up in that situation. And the beauty of perhaps the journey that I've been on, I was fortunate that I started meditating at the age of 19. And the very thing that the meditation, which is taught at the Brahma Kumaris, is called Raja Yoga, which means a Raja is the sovereign, to find that being inside of me that is enough, that is complete, that is whole. And so the more I take time in my day to really focus my attention on myself in that way. Lydia kept saying that, it's very important to me who I am, to identify myself. And I think that that identity is not just what I do, but it's the very being that I am. And so for each one of us, when we wake up each day, we all know the tasks that we have to perform, and that's just the doing part of our lives. But the fact that when you wake up each day, there's a living part of you that is kind, that is gentle, that is loving, that has a deep sense of peace. That actually is the living being that you are. And that living being doesn't need any qualifications. It doesn't need any certifications. It actually exists eternally. And it's that beautiful vibration that lies inside of me that I infuse in my day, in the way I take my responsibilities and I fulfill them. The energy that I am, that loving, peaceful being, goes through all the tasks that I perform and allows the tasks to become something that can render a service, that can show kindness and care in other people's lives. And so it's really important for us to know that even as a driver, I may have all the skills of driving a car, but to drive with care and compassion, with courtesy, with respect, that actually comes from that special being that I really am. And so I would say that for me, the turning point was to really acknowledge that, I am a special individual. And yes, there's no duplicate. And so I need to step into my power in such a way that I live my life to the fullest. And when I give myself permission to be me, I also don't infringe myself onto others. It's when we don't have enough self-respect that we leech onto somebody and try and become a half or something to take from somebody to fulfill myself. And so in a way, you'd be doing yourself such a great favor by honoring your own life. And because of your own honor, it's easy to give that respect and regard to others as well. So Lydia, that's where I thought we could just, move in the direction as to what do we do now? Those things exist, but how will we move forward in making sure that from this point onwards, the changes I can make.
I think actually before.
Good evening. Can I quickly say something before Lydia comes in?
Okay.
There's also a hand from Ru Ramai, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. I'm Kaya.
Hello,
I just
Kaya.
wanted to, yes, one thing that also makes you stay in a toxic relationship like myself is that you always scared of what people might say. You always have this tendency of thinking what others might say when you leave this relationship. So you are so codependent, or you just want to stick with this person, even though there is no love or there is nothing like really exists, but you're just scared of what other people might say, and then you just stay in this relationship for the longest time ever.
You're absolutely right. And that's why a little bit of self-care can give us the strength not to be influenced by others. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, most definitely.
Okay. Okay, is that Rumi? Do you want to share, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Okay.
I absolutely love this conversation. I think it's such a blessing that we're touching on this. I loved the premise with which you started this conversation, Lydia, when you spoke about identity. I think it is so important for us to have a strong sense of who we are. And it is important for that sense of self to be anchored in our spirituality, whatever it is you subscribe to. If you have a sense of your purpose, your existence being important, you are able to understand that as you navigate through this life, through the relationships that you have with other people, that you can do so in a healthy way. You can do so from the premise that you are loved, that you are valued by your creator. And I think it is so important for us to have that anchoring. We have so many experiences, a myriad of experiences that kind of make the sum total of who we become. And there are so many things that paint our, that you mentioned this, Usha, that sense of wholeness, that place of wholeness, that place that is not defined by accolades or titles or anything external. And I think it is important for us to remain anchored in that internal understanding of self, that spiritual understanding of self, because that will better, that will assist us in navigating our relationships, because our dependency will then be rooted or connected to, the higher being, however you define that. I think that's just my take on how we can better navigate our relationship.
I think, thank you so much. That's it's very important. I think the fact that we started off with identity, I think so that's really our trump card here. So Lydia?
Thank you so much. I do agree with all the speakers, and really just carrying on from understanding our anchor, our rootedness. I think many of us would be inspired going forward. And I think even I would like to add by saying, even before entering into any relationship, whether it's a work relationship or personal relationship, I would like people even just to ask themselves before entering to say, why am I entering into this relationship? Is it necessary? Things like that. Because sometimes we also enter into relationships because of other reasons. And most of these reasons tend to be like for external, that are still based on external things, that externalities that we talked about. So for example, if you enter into a relationship because you see a potential partner with money, there is change that do happen. And I don't think that's a good reason to enter into a relationship because somebody has money. The economy changes, things do change. So, but rather people should then ask themselves quite deeply and understand that I think personally, people should enter any relationship because then it serves it serves their purpose, why they are here on earth, and actually still using our anchor as a let me say, as a radar or a compass to decide which relationships are better. I am aware that we are also running out of time, but I also wanted to encourage. I love what the first speaker also talked when she mentions the idea of waking up, like the wake up call, and really, I would like to encourage people to be much more in tune with this inner person that we talked about, and also be in tune or connected with the anchor. It's because this helps when we become much more conscious of the inner person or our inner person, including whether you call it, the source. What happens is that then you become much more available of what is true, and then even solutions come to you. So I would like people to become much more honest with themselves. And also, if they are in any relationship, enter into relationships that promotes honesty and not hiding stuff, or maybe even you hiding your concerns because you want to make somebody happy. A space that creates everyone to be vulnerable and really be able to express their thoughts or their feelings at that time, because when we become true to self, we'll be able to even understand the source of, let's say, if you're angry, we would understand why are you even angry in the first place, and then we'll be able to manage that. So without taking any further time, one thing I love that the process of becoming more in tune with our conscience or even our consciousness, it's very much brought when we practice every day through meditation. And I love that quite a lot. And I love engaging on it very often, as much as I can when I interact with Sister Usha. I would like you, Sister Usha, to take us through a process where some, maybe it could be the first time they experience it, but others, it could be maybe an ongoing thing that they normally do. But after listening to today's discussions and inspirations or even challenges, to lead us on through a meditation to close our conversation for today.
Thank you. That's will be my pleasure, because I think everything we spoke about is in a way signaling us to strengthen that core. And really an encouragement to everyone is that you have what it takes to be you, and nobody else can do that. So the best thing is to let's give some attention to me. So I'm going to invite you to sit with your eyes open, and I know shortly the screen will change and there'll be a beautiful reflection of a point of light in front of us. So if you could rest your eyes on that point of light and listen to my words just as little indicators in terms of where to project your thoughts. So as I'm sitting quietly, first of all, I let my body completely surrender into the chair. I let go of anything I am holding on to. Firstly, my body, releasing my tension from my feet, my legs, my fingers, my arms, my hands, releasing any tension in my stomach, my chest, and I bring my attention to the center of my forehead. I feel myself to be the living light, a sparkling being of energy. This body is made of the 5 elements, and each one of us has a body that has a shape, a size, an age, a nationality. It's like the brand I wear. But I, the being, like the 7.5 billion brilliant beings in the world. I am just a tiny point of conscious light energy. All 7.5 billion souls are alike in form, and yet each brilliant light has a perfect expression of itself. Each one of us has the radiance of peace, love, happiness, joy, wisdom, and power. Each one of us carries this powerful vibration of being light energy. I have never been created, and I'll never be destroyed. In this awareness of my eternity, I can transcend time and space. And in this awareness of my true self, I bring myself to this point where I choose not to look outward to the things that are constantly changing and are temporary, but I choose to work from the inside out. And as I set my focus on my inner self, I allow the sparkle of peace and love and happiness to shine through. The more I focus my attention on being the light, the less I am influenced by the shadows of any external situation or circumstance. I choose to be that powerful light, and that is who I am. I am complete. I am enough. Om Shanti. I am a being. I am peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Usha.
And I think we must encourage ourselves to make time, mornings and evenings, to do this for ourselves.
Absolutely. I would like to really thank everybody who managed to make it or join us today. We really hope that, well, this is not the first and the last time we engage on this topic. I hope that we'll have other conversations in the future, and we hope that you can join us once again. And do please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Lydia, for joining us from so far away, but I'm glad that we're on the same time scale, so it feels like we're just at home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. And for all of those who had the courage to share, thank you so much. It was very much appreciated.
Thank you and good night, everyone.
Good night.